Dear subscribers, greeting from the gaze, from the first platform of New Europe. Today we'll speak about policy of sanctions and how effective they are. We will also talk about the big businesses that have excited the Russian market and those that haven't done so yet. And now, welcome, Andrii Onopriienko.
Thomas Mann once said that a business is a self-interest in its purest form. So, if business is answering the question how we live, then politics probably answers who lives. Then the war must be a business and politics molded in one. Because the business obviously is good for someone these days. Today we will talk a bit more about who and what that someone might be. Hello, welcome to The Gaze. Countries in the European Union, United States and other states imposed sanctions against Russia for the first time in response to its aggression towards Ukraine in 2014. In 2022, after the full-scale invasion of Russian forces, these restrictions were significantly expanded. According to the global sanctions and tracking database Castellum, since the end of February 2022, nearly 14,800 restrictions have been imposed on Russia. In total, since 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine, there have been over 17,500 sanctions. Russia is the most sanctioned country in the world, surpassing Iran, Syria, and North Korea. However, despite these sanctions, Russia still manages to import almost any banned goods and materials. Journalistic investigations have revealed that over the last 6 months, the aggressor state has been importing prohibited goods through United Arab Emirates, Turkey, China, and other former Soviet Union countries. In the beginning of 2023, Russia imported microchips from Western companies worth over $502 million. These microchips are to be used in missiles production and other types of weaponry. At least $171 million worth of spare parts for civil aviation were imported. The four largest Russian airlines, Aeroflot, S7, Pobeda, and Rossiya, imported spare parts for aircraft totaling 47 million, 35 million, 13 million, and 15 million respectively since the beginning of this year. Missile production has also returned to pre-war levels. This was reported by the New York Times. According to sources, after sanctions were applied, missile productions in Russia showed down, but already by the end of 2022 it began to rise again. The supply network of key components for missile production is managed by the Russian Ministry of Defense and Special Services of Russia. Elements are smuggled into third countries, often to Armenia and Turkey, and then delivered to Russia. According to experts' estimates, Russia now has air-based Kh-55 cruise missiles than before the war. Ordinary Russians are also not left without Western technology. Since February 25th, Russia has imported iPhones worth over $389 million. Most of them were ordered from the United Arab Emirates. This only concerns officially declared shipments through customs. Another portion of smartphones ends up in Russia through the grey market. Other electronics, including Dell products, by the way, continue to flow into Russia. Before the war, the American company was the main supplier of server equipment to Russia. Since the beginning of 2023, the aggressor state has imported equipment worth over 88 million. Servers and their components were delivered by Chinese, Hong Kong, Indian, Turkish, Thai, and Emirati companies. Additionally, Russia imported products from American companies Intel and AMD, including microprocessors worth over 169 million and 35 million, respectively. I have a question to artificial intelligence. When and by whom were the first sanctions imposed, and against whom?
The concept of economic sanctions has evolved over time, but one of the earliest instances of sanctions dates back to ancient Greece. In 432 BC, the city-state of Megara was subjected to trade restrictions by the Athenian Empire during the Peloponnesian War, serving as an early form of sanctions. The modern form of sanctions as a tool of international policy emerged in the early 20th century. The League of Nations, established after World War I, imposed sanctions against aggressor nations, notably Italy in response to its invasion of Abyssinia, now Ethiopia, in 1935. This marked one of the first instances of organized, international economic sanctions in modern history.
According to investigative journalists, in order to deliver sanctioned goods to Russia, special individuals established companies engaged in so-called parallel imports. These companies either purchase the required goods on the domestic market or directly order them from manufacturers for further re-exporting them to Russia. Such companies are registered by both Russians and foreigners, but the option involving foreigners is considered more reliable, as some suppliers verify not only the origin of the goods but also CEO citizenship. Exporters prefer to register companies in neutral countries with large, powerful economies, of course, in active international trade, such as China and Turkey. The United Arab Emirates and former Soviet Union countries are also quite actively used for this purpose. According to yet another investigation by Reuters, from May 2022 to June 2023, Russian airlines obtained spare parts for their Airbus and Boeing aircraft amounting to over $1.2 billion, despite Western sanctions. The agency analyzed customs data, revealing that various equipment was supplied to Russia's aviation industry during the period of sanctions. These ranged from essential items to maintain flight worthiness, such as landing gear, cabin pressure valves, and cockpit displays, to toilet seats, coffee makers, and cabin crew phones. Ukrainian president commented on the matter.
It is crucial for us that they do not find opportunities to circumvent. Some of these sanctions are being circumvented through other states. However, this is an issue that we are closely monitoring.
Watch this.
However, not only technology and smartphones find their way into Russia despite sanctions, but even products like Coca-Cola continue to be consumed without any restrictions. Coca-Cola remains the second most popular carbonated beverage in the aggressor state of Russia, even though the international giant left Russian market at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. However, all the beverages currently available in Russia are still imported, so a variety of the beverages that were not previously produced in Russia because local companies did not manufacture them and foreign supplies were blocked by the Russian Federal Customs Service have now appeared on the market. Meanwhile, the facilities of the former Coca-Cola, which used to operate in Russia, were somehow transformed into Russian brand Dobry Cola, which is good cola in translation. Russian marketers didn't particularly bother to ponder over the name of the brand's appearance. The manufacturer not only took over the facilities of Coca-Cola Russian branch, but also the taste of the beverage itself. This is a characteristic trait of Russia's business, just copy and paste. The same story with McDonald's. When the company exited Russia, Russian Vkusno i Tochko, tasty and that's it, and the restaurants appeared in the very same locations as McDonald's. Last year, on July 12th, the chain opened its first 15 restaurants, including its flagship establishment on Pushkinskaya Square in Moscow, occupying the premises of the same former McDonald's restaurant, which in 1990s became the American company's first project in the USSR. The menu of the revamped chain has remained largely unchanged, but the Mac prefix removed from the names of the dishes, and there is no longer a Big Mac or McFlurry line. In practice, we see that not everything works as it should, but I still have questions. How do sanctions affect the country's economy, or how to have influence? AI, please answer.
Trade disruption. Sanctions often limit a country's ability to engage in international trade. This reduces exports and imports, affecting various industries and leading to economic contraction. Financial strain. Sanctions can cut off a country's access to global financial markets. This restricts their ability to secure loans, make investments, and conduct international financial transactions. Inflation and price increases. Social and political consequences. Shifts in economic policies.
Thank you, dear artificial intelligence, my assistant. With onset of full-scale war, several international companies pledged solidarity with Ukraine by committing to leave the Russian market, some immediately, while others gradually. In total, nearly 1,000 companies announced changes to their plans regarding Russia. Some companies did indeed follow through on their promises. Experts categorize these companies into several groups. Those that continued to operate in Russia without any restrictions, those that continued to operate but refrained from further investment, and those scaling down their operations, those suspending their activities, and those fully ceasing operations in Russia. With the onset of full-scale war, several international companies pledged solidarity with Ukraine by committing to leave the Russian market, some immediately while others gradually. In total, nearly 1,000 companies announced changes to their plans regarding Russia. Some companies did indeed follow through on their promises. Experts categorize these companies into several groups. Those that continue to operate in Russia without restrictions, those that continue to operate but refrain from further investments, those scaling down their operations, those suspending their activities, and those fully ceasing operations in Russia. According to Kyiv Research School of Economics, only 8% of international companies that were active in Russia before the war have completely exited the Russian market. Approximately 2,500 companies continue to operate in Russia in various capacities, thereby contributing to the financing of the war against Ukraine.
Watch this.
I'm glad to give you another guest, Andrii Onopriienko, Deputy Development Director PM of LeaveRussia.org, Kyiv School of Economics. Andrii, hello, good day.
Hello, glad to see you.
It's nice to see you indeed. My first question is, let's start with a simple one. Why are only 8% exit the Russian market in full? Only 8?
That depends. That depends on which number to calculate.
Right.
First of all, I would like to say some brief introduction of our project. At the beginning of Russian invasion of Ukraine, the KSA Institute launched an analytical project, which was initially named Sanctions, which had aimed to collect data on foreign companies which operate on the Russian market and limited or terminated the activity or staying. Similar projects was run, for example, by Yale Management, some other institutions. In our case, it was renamed lately to Leave Russia. We have a website, LeaveRussia.org. Everyone can see the latest statistics there. And the issue is that our database is the biggest one, and now it's almost contains almost 3,500 companies in it. And we are including companies, adding them almost every single day. That's why, because our database is, being bigger and bigger, and number of companies which are exiting in full, of course, not so much progressing as we are. So if to calculate the total number of entries, as of today, we identified exactly 274 companies which exited in full, meaning that they fully sold their business or liquidated their local entities in Russia. And if we divided total number of entries, of course, it will be just, it looks like not enough, just 8%. But more correct approach would be about half of companies in our database. To be more precise, it's about 1,400 companies. For them, we collected local entities. We understand their business, we understand which entities they own. And if we divide to that number, to those companies which had offices, business in Russia, not only trading relations, for example, then the number would be much bigger, I would say. It depends on which year calculate the revenue for the invasion. Last year, those numbers then will be about 18 or 21%.
Okay, but do you know the cases? Yeah, do you know the cases that companies in these days are not exiting Russian market, but coming into it?
In our public database, we have it in open access. It could be found easily through internet. As I said, almost each day we identify new and new companies. Some of them have as well, like have entities in Russia, local business. Some have just trading relations, or for example, the components were found in some drones or some military supplies or other supplies. And we are adding, just to name few names from the recent, for example, Tokyo Boeki Group, or Virgin Media O2 or World Aquatics, or there are, if anyone would like to see the list, he or she could download our database. It goes like from top to bottom, and at the bottom, new companies are arriving every week, and we update the file by Sundays, and anyone can see how many companies appeared in our database just for the latest few days. And of course, on our website, synchronized, and everyone can see how much new companies were added.
Sometimes I don't hear you so well. There's probably a technical problem, but I hope you hear me now. I'm intended to give you a question, which is a personal question. Say you, Andrei, ran a big international company, and you see an option when others are leaving Russia. You, if you came into Russian market, you see a lot of money and opportunity. Would you take it?
Personally, me not. In any case, it's a matter also of reputation. Of course, if the company from some countries and some has is not well known, yes, without some strong reputation, and they just need dirty money, of course, for them that could be a matter of, of earning more. But as most of the companies are on the way to exit, we know, and our colleagues from Yale School of Management identified that more than 1,000 companies is waiting for their turn to exit, to be sold. And there are a lot of different difficulties created by Russian authorities, which do not allow companies to exit easily. So just from that perspective, entering the market and just picking up someone's share is really brutal, especially when we see continuation of that aggressive war for more than 17 months or soon. And that's also, as I said, a matter of reputation. And also, we've made some survey at the beginning of the war, in the first months when first exits took place, and we identified that those companies which exited quite quickly, they were able to increase their market share quite significantly, and much more than those who were still staying. Also, we see in latest time a lot of let's say nationalizations. To be honest, it's just nationalizations of business. There are a lot of cases already in place, and there will be much more. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, I'll take that as an answer, reputation. But what does the term import substitution mean for Russia? I'll explain myself. Like, Russian propaganda claims that they don't need anything. They're self-sufficient, they have everything on their own, but Russian plane, a plane stolen from Irish Air Company and operated by Russians, suddenly ends up with an emergency landing somewhere in the Russian fields. The answer clearly C. Sanctions did that. No spare parts. Just no spare parts, Western spare parts. So Russian propaganda obviously lies, of course. But my question is, are Russians able to even somewhat to substitute Western technologies and goods? Is that possible?
Not at all. We see a lot of different schemes which are appearing, a lot of different lists when they make substitution of import, yes, from direct suppliers to some third parties. We see that in some cases they are buying through third countries some strange things, for example, as components from some electronics from which you use at home. And those components, unfortunately, are used also for military purposes. Some chips, schemas, and so on. Of course, they are not so deeply developed from technological point of view. Right. So they definitely need those components, those technologies. And they are trying to do it through some Asian countries, through China, through Turkey, through Armenia, Kazakhstan, etc. Okay. So unfortunately, yeah, it takes place, but sanctions, as you said, also are doing their job. And I hope that secondary sanctions and clear, just pointing enough of attention to from everyone, yes, from government, from local society, from NGOs, etc., would keep sanctions work as they used to have to.
Okay.
There are a lot of also cases of contraband, which I didn't mention, but there was some analysis done last year that through contraband, they were supplied for goods for more than $20 billion, which is very significant amount.
Yeah, well, to explain to my audience, contraband is smuggling. Okay, so let me, it's okay. Let me read you something. Let me return to that plane thing. According to mass media, the hydraulic system failed on that plane, on aircraft traveling on the Sochi-Omsk route. 159 passengers, including 23 children and 6 crew members, were on board on this Airbus. It is reported that no one was injured during the emergency landing, and in social networks where users commented on this incident, it was emphasized that the failure of the equipment was due to a lack of spare parts for foreign-made airliners. So here are the consequences of sanctions against Russia getting obvious. Sanctions work. After the withdrawal of Airbus from Russian market, the company does not service the remaining aircraft for some reason. And it very much looks like the damage is very repairable. So the plane will be disassembled for spare parts right there in Russian fields. Well, at least some spare parts, right? So it is dangerous in terms of airplanes and aircraft and everything. But is it impossible for Russia to substitute anything? I mean, some food maybe even.
Yeah, thank you for your question. First of all, yes, it's easy to, let's say, to import some small things, yes, or something which is not very complex, as in case of aircrafts, those spare parts could not be easily imported. More sanctions a lot of time to supply any spare parts to Russia. That's why they will have more and more issues in air transportation segment industry. Such, as Ukrainians, we hope that as many planes will be, as you showed on the example, there will be more and more such stories. What we saw recently is that, for example, Lesser Aircraft from Ireland agreed on settlement over Aeroflot jets, which landed in Russia. We know that there were a lot of cases when Russia leased some planes, yes, and they didn't provide it back to lessors. And that was a real steal of, and also we saw in news some interesting things that, for example, the authorities allow planes to fly without regular maintenance, which should be according to strict schedule. So they are taking that risk, understanding that their population will be,
I mean,
crashed.
well, Andrii.
That's the sense of Russian authorities. They pay any attention to that population.
Russian authorities can't do anything about physics.
They are ready to.
Yeah, I agree with you, but Russian authorities can't do anything about physics. So if the plane is damaged and not properly maintained,
luckily, yes.
Exactly. So, well, I got all my questions, I got all my answers. Thank you very much for your time and expertise. Hope to see you soon with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Watch this.
Scandal fresh from the oven. The Security Service of Ukraine has announced suspicions of financing Russian aggression in Ukraine by Russian businessman Mikhail Fridman. According to the investigation, since the beginning of Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine, Mr. Fridman has poured in approximately 2 billion rubles into several military plants in the aggressor state. These include the Tula cartridge works, as well as the Yalamov-Ural optical mechanical plant, which manufactures high-tech equipment for combat aircrafts and helicopters. According to the investigation, Fridman organized the collection of material and technical assistance for Russian troops. Furthermore, his business insurance companies insured Russian military equipment as well as the lives and health of soldiers in the Russian army. In addition, Ukrainian intelligence services believe that he facilitated cooperation between a telecommunications company under his control and the Russian State Intelligence Service, FSB, to establish operations on the annexed territories. According to journalists, Mr. Fridman is currently in London for some comfortable reason. It's worth noting that sanctions have been imposed on him by European Union, United States of America, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and Switzerland. Ukraine has also imposed sanctions against him. In September 2022, the Wall Street Journal reported that Fridman offered Ukraine $1 billion of his own money in hopes for having sanctions lifted. Fridman himself denies that allegations, of course, but Michael Fridman is not the only one hoping for the lifting of Western sanctions. Recently, the European Union's court refused to lift sanctions on several Russian oligarchs. In particular, the Luxembourg court rejected a lawsuit by Russian billionaire Dmitry Pompiansky. According to the judiciary, he was involved in an economic sector that is a significant source of income for the Kremlin. Judges also dismissed a lawsuit seeking the removal of EU sanctions from businessman Gennady Timchenko, who is considered one of the closest allies of the aggressor country's president, Vladimir Putin. However, at the beginning of the month, an interesting twist occurs. The European Court decides to lift EU sanctions against Russian businessman and former head of the internet provider Ozon Group, Alexander Shulgin. Restrictions were also lifted from members of his family. Among the multitude of European sanctions imposed against Russia following Russia's invasions of Ukraine, this sets a precedent. It's the first time a court has decided to lift sanctions from a business personality. Moreover, the European Union will not extend sanctions against Russian businessmen Grigory Vereshkin and Farhad Akhmedov. The term of the current restrictions is set to expire this week. Individual sanctions, to be or not to be. Let's talk for more about the matter with our next guest. Michael Sohlman, former board of the Swedish Institute of International Affairs and former director of the Nobel Foundation. As much as that. Hello, Michael.
Hello, very nice to see you.
It is nice to see you again. My first question is, talk us through, please, the whole thing. How should we take the European Court's decision to lift European Union sanctions on Russian businessmen? Is this a unique case, or does it indicate a troubling trend?
I wouldn't think there's a troubling trend. I don't think, I don't know, but sure not the Court of Justice would take a new trend. And they are looking at the circumstances, I guess, of these three gentlemen. I don't know them, and so I can't have any hypothesis of a new trend. Of course, this hypothetically, there are rich Russians who have not been supporting Putin's war. To what extent these three have done it or not, I have no idea.
Okay, well, I'll take that as an answer, but my second question is, will the frozen Russian assets be transferred to Ukraine? Do you believe this is going to happen?
What in the scenario, which at least I think 99% of Swedes hope for, that is the victory of Ukraine. Those assets are low-hanging fruit. Will be more difficult to press Russia for other forms of compensation, which of course would be a natural outcome of any agreement. But given the forecast now, well, I shouldn't go into that, but we are all hoping for a Ukrainian victory, and then these assets are there to take.
We all do, indeed. Looking from the side of the West, what role does Ukraine play in the process of transferring these funds faster, if any at all? Is it a significant player or just sitting and waiting duck?
The role which Ukraine plays in what circumstance?
Yes.
In what question?
Exactly. My question is Ukraine's, I'll rephrase my question. So is Ukraine's effort significant? And does the West see that it is a significant effort that Ukraine takes in terms of getting these frozen assets faster?
Yes, I'm not privy to the negotiations, but the position of Ukraine is well known. What I understand is the hurdles are different kind of legal rules, laws, etc. in the European Union. What you can or what you cannot do. At present, they are frozen. But obviously, serious people think that there are ways to eliminate these hurdles and use these resources.
My next question is, what do you think the motivation of the countries that are helping Russia to circumvent sanctions, like Turkey or Kazakhstan? Is that purely money? Is that purely economical?
Well, I think it's different for these countries. Turkey is playing its particular game in the region, and has a kind of mafioso relationship with the present leader of the Russian Federation. So they are in the same game, as it were. And one lever which Erdogan has is this giving possibilities for people to circumvent the sanctions. He is both dependent on Russia for economic reasons. He has led the Turkish economy into very great difficulties. At the same time, Russia is dependent on him. So it's a kind of tug of war between them. When it comes to the Trans-Caspian republics, states, I think they have different degrees of affinity to Russia, and therefore different policies. I guess Turkmenistan or Kyrgyzstan is most dependent on Russia, Kazakhstan less so. But what we see is, from the point of view of the West, well, particularly in this country, our trade has surged with Turkey and with Kazakhstan in a remarkable way, which indicates that part of the Russian import demand, is then satisfied via Constantinople or Istanbul or Ankara and Astana. But not all that might be goods which are under sanctions. There might be other goods which Russians are getting this way because the companies don't want or are not able to sell directly to Russia.
Let us speculate a little.
But Swedish trade with Russia has always been very small, 1% of our exports at best.
That was historically was very small, right? It never was big.
Historically. So it's a different case for Finland, where they have had periods of huge dependence or I would say huge influence of trade with Russia, up to 15% of total exports.
Yeah, that is much. Yeah,
but it's a completely different situation.
Let us just speculate. What just a thought came to my mind. So, if Kazakhstan, or say Kazakhstan, I don't know, a country that is dependent on Russia, for some reason, the president of that country says no to helping Russia to circumvent sanctions, to double exporting, which is just no, for some, ends it up. That ends here and now. Do you think Russia has a real influence and is powerful enough now to do something about it?
Well, which country do you talk about?
It doesn't matter. Oh, really, maybe it matters. That's a good point. Okay, let's take Kazakhstan. Say Kazakhstan is no more helping Russia in any way and turns absolutely pro-Ukrainian and pro-Western and pro-European. Hypothetically, can Russia do something about it?
Of course, the possibilities of Russia to influence Kazakhstan is completely different compared to Scandinavian countries, for example, or even Germany. I mean, now is not dependent to any substantial degree at all, actually, on Russia. Whereas Kazakhstan is a completely different question. It's enormous long border. It's a huge volume of trade. It's a sizable, 15% of the population which are Russian speakers or Russians. So it's a different situation. But at the same time, you see how Mr. Tokayev is quite successful in navigating this back into Nazarbayev's this multi-vectoral policy. There is a fact that there is another neighbor which is much more important, not much more, but at least as Russia, and that's China. And I think it's very important to note that President Xi, on the way to the meeting, the summit in Samarkand, he stopped by in Astana and made a declaration, which one should read properly, because there he says that China is very appreciating the developments in Kazakhstan and will take a categorical stand against any third party intervening into the internal matters of Kazakhstan. This is not aimed at Iceland or even Sweden. It's another country which is aimed at. And that is the balancing act of President Tokayev, which is impressive, I would say.
Indeed. What do you think for this situation in the world and with Ukraine and Russia, this brutal war, is it favorable for China after all?
So, sorry, I didn't get your question.
Is this in situation with Ukraine, is the war in Ukraine, this invasion of Russia in Ukraine, is this whole situation is favorable for China, do you think?
Yes, it brings Russia nearly closer to China, makes it more dependent, and therefore the coalition which China or Xi wants to construct against the United States or the West, well,
Right.
mainly the United States, not the West in general, is reinforced. And then purely commercially, I understand the Chinese culture is sophisticated but quite commercial too. The situation puts the Russians have put them in a situation where they have only one or two customers, major customers. It's China, and then for the oil, it's India. Problem is that they have problems to make use of the rupees they are earning from their oil in India. They are sort of, it's not convertible. And there's a similar problem with the yuan, which they are earning. That's less so. But it's really, from point of view of Beijing, it's a favorable situation with a weak seller who
Absolutely.
can't touch many others.
Yeah,
So,
enormous resources of Russia are probably very favorable for China to get. I mean, it's very interesting. They are very interested in that. Why? My next question is more to you.
But I would say, I would add here that it seems so completely stupid from the Russians' point of view. There has been, since the occupation of Crimea and Donbass, there have been so-called thinkers in Moscow who have been advocating this turn to the east. But it's quite clear that the plan wasn't at all what has happened. The plan was to take Ukraine in 3 days, and then Russia would be rather strong. Well, that's according to the obvious Kremlin plan. Now they sit there and in a very difficult situation.
All right. Well, the Kremlin is. Are you telling me the Kremlin is in a very difficult situation? And you see that from Sweden.
Well, I mean, in this situation with trade.
Okay, trade.
Being cut off from the West.
He cut off from the West. Yeah.
Explicitly said by this former president they have that. Yes, if you listen to the famous meeting of the Security Council, in a couple of weeks, or they will come on all four, crawling, begging for our energy, etc. So that was the plan.
I mean, that sounds like, like a line from the Star Wars to me. They come with all the glory and everything. But why wouldn't he stop? Why wouldn't Putin just stop all that? Yeah, I mean, why Putin wouldn't stop all this, trying to do some real negotiation with the international community, with the international society, with Ukraine? Why wouldn't he withdraw back his army? Because the nation wouldn't agree to that?
I certainly don't know. Why one can only hypothesize. The standard explanation is that he can't backtrack because he has put so much in this adventure, and he would be threatened not only politically but also physically, and that's one explanation. Another more sinister explanation is that he thinks, yes, it didn't go the way we planned, but we can go on. And as he has the attitude to human lives, which he has, he can go on, he thinks, for very long. And, well, his public pronouncements boil down to that situation is under control. He can't repeat that everything goes according to the plan, but victory is somewhere there in the future. So that's the sinister calculation. Unfortunately, I think that's the most realistic one. Why he doesn't stop.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Sohlman, for your time and for your efforts, for your job, and for your honest and sincere answers. Thank you.
Well, thank you for calling. You're always welcome.
Watch this.
Another element of the pressure on the Kremlin is the frozen assets of its inner circle and friends, Russian oligarchs. The total value of the frozen assets is estimated at $300 billion. However, as for the amounts that were mentioned, France has frozen funds of the Russian central bank amounting to 22 billion euro, as well as approximately 150 million euro is in private accounts. Italy has frozen 2.5 billion euro, while the UK has frozen nearly 21 billion. Washington has frozen $330 billion belonging to Russia, and Germany has frozen over 5 billion euro of the central banks and certain Russian assets. Kyiv is counting on using these funds for the reconstruction of Ukraine. It is worth mentioning that as a result of the war initiated by Russia on February 24, 2022, Ukrainian cities and villages have suffered damages totaling over mind-boggling $700 billion, and the war is not over yet. Last year, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, signed a decree on the forced seizure of the property owned by the Russian Federation and its residents. However, Europe is still contemplating the legal means to seize these assets in favor of Ukraine, despite repeated expressions of readiness within the EU to recover Russian assets for Ukraine's benefit. Practical steps in these directions have not taken in the year and a half of this warfare. Perhaps one reason for the lack of political consensus on this issue is the fear that such actions could be misunderstood by investors from countries in the global south, as well as China and Saudi Arabia. The latter holds a significant portion of their reserves in euro and US dollars. One option is to transfer the income generated from these assets to Ukraine. Yes, that's right. To clear the fog, all these assets held in Euroclear accounts continue to generate income right now. However, like the assets themselves, these income belongs to Russia. According to Euroclear procedures and EU regulations, the depository must reinvest such income, meaning it should be reinvested in instruments that also generate income. Subsequently, income from reinvestments will no longer be considered Russia's income, that it will be credited to Euroclear's income. The EU can then transfer these funds to Ukraine directly, but will it do so? On a positive side, on September 7th, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced that the United States would, for the first time, transfer confiscated assets from Russian oligarchs subject to sanctions to Ukraine. As Blinken emphasized, I quote, "Those who facilitated Putin's aggressive war must be held accountable."
For the first time, we are transferring to Ukraine assets seized from sanctioned Russian oligarchs, which will now be used to support Ukrainian military veterans.
How deep these assets of Russians are frozen? Let us discuss that with our next guest. So I'm giving you our next guest, Evhen Tsybulenko, Professor of International Law, Tallinn, Estonia. Hello, Evhen.
Good evening. Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini, Heroям Slava. It's great to see the process of transferring funds has begun finally. However, why is this happening only now? Why so long?
The problem is that state funds, they have so-called immunity, and it's not so easy to find legally correct procedure to confiscate them. Problem is that our Western partners, they're afraid that if such funds will be confiscated from Russia, it will prevent other countries to invest to Western banks, Western economy in general, because third countries could be afraid that their investments are not properly protected. And that was exactly one of the reasons why this process was so long. Actually, Estonia was one of the initiators to confiscate the frozen Russian funds, but Estonia always stressed that such measures could be effective only if it's done by all countries of European Union and Western Hemisphere in general. And that's why they tried first to negotiate it on European Union level. But unfortunately, as we can see, this issue are still frozen. And because of that, Estonia decided to adopt its own legislation and to show an example to other European Union countries how to do it. So now this draft is almost prepared. It was not yet announced, the exact text, but it seems that during the autumn it could be adopted by Estonia to show the way to other countries.
I would just love to see a small country of Estonia. I was born and raised in Latvia, just by the way. So I would love to see my neighboring country, Estonia, showing an example to the whole world and to the United States, to the United Kingdom, of how things should be done. It would be lovely to see. So when can we expect the next decisive steps from Ukraine's allied countries in this matter? When do you think this will become a trend?
I hope so. Actually, there are some other positive examples outside of European Union. Canada, for example, was among the countries who also introduced such legislation. So basically, I hope that there is a kind of situation. It's same to providing of weapons whatsoever. Everybody afraid to be first. Then somebody started the process, then others start to join it. Of course, it will be pure speculations to say about specific dates, but I hope so, I believe so, that this Estonian example will indeed the step which will move forward the entire process in the entire European Union.
So please talk us a little bit through. How does this process of confiscating funds and returning them to Ukraine work on international level? Like there's a bank or there's a system that finds Russian assets, what happens next? And how to prove that these assets are really Russian?
Yeah, it's another very essential question. As I said, the text of this Ukrainian Estonian legislation was not shown yet. So I could not tell you about specific details, but as I said, it's important to find the legally correct instruments, and there are different approaches how to do it. But it seems that the most reasonable way is to connect it to the payment of reparations to Ukraine from that funds. Now there is already a lot of attempts to, first of all, record all Russian international crimes which were committed in Ukraine, also to calculate all damages, and Europe in that sense already takes active part. In Hague there was the bureau created which actually helps to record those damages which were caused by Russian aggression to Ukraine. So I think, yes, this confiscation will be connected to the reparation of the damages which were actually the result of the Russian aggression.
But
I think it is legally grounded way, let's say.
Okay. Thank you very much for this answer. But what legal mechanisms, this is a new mechanisms and international agreements are in place to facilitate the return of confiscated assets to the country? Because this is a whole new thing, I believe, if I'm right. Please explain to us, because the international society was not ready for a situation like that. And I'm talking not only about the war, but about the frozen the assets, that large assets, finding these assets, returning these assets not to the previous owner, but to the Ukraine. It's an amazing job to be done, and it has been done, and it's a lot of time and effort. But what mechanisms are in place to make it faster, if there are any?
So as I said, I don't know what will be the exact mechanism because the text of the draft is not open yet. But yes, indeed, it's a very impressive development because, yes, nothing new in the frozen of the different funds, but to confiscate it in favor of another country, it's something indeed pretty new and unique procedure. But of course, it could be done by different ways. It could be done by the decision of the European Union. Also, we should keep in mind, and it's another track, let's say, it's different compensation after the Ukrainian different companies addressed the issue to international arbitrage, and there were already several cases. Then Ukrainian companies won the arbitrage, and respectively. There are specific mechanisms how to confiscate different funds if a country refuses to follow the arbitrary decisions. So here it's another possibility. And in certain sense, it's probably even easier because here the mechanism is pretty well established. But of course, problem here that it's only a specific amount of money or funds which are specifically connected to the specific cases. But still, the amount of money could be very high, and respectively it also could be used actually.
Can Russia do something about these frozen assets being transferred to Ukraine? Can it, in some way, to block the whole procedure, or the Kremlin is just in a position to sit and wait what is going on?
No, of course, they try to put pressure on different channels. The latest development probably is that Russia started to threatening Estonia in particular, that such actions will lead to the confiscation of Estonian and other countries who will use it in Russia. But we should clearly understand that, yes, Russia definitely can do it. But all such confiscation will be clearly illegal, and later they will need to compensate it anyway. Because, of course, before the military defeat of Russia, it could be problematic, but I'm pretty sure that sooner or later Russia will be defeated, and all those damages it will need to compensate.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, and for your experience and for your time.
Thank you for the invitation. It was my own pleasure.
Pleasure was mine. Thank you.
Watch this.
And I just need to share this interesting fact with you. There is only one step from love to hatred, as we all know, and backwards just as well. North Korea is currently one of the countries providing military assistance to Russia in the war against Ukraine. In January 2023, the United States released evidence that North Korea is supplying weapons to the Kremlin. Although North Korea denies this and accuses the United States in turn of spreading rumors, in mid-September, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un traveled to Russia. Planned talks between Russian and North Korean delegations, face-to-face communication between Putin and Kim Jong-un, and an official lunch in order of the North Korean leader were on the agenda. The meeting took place somewhere in the Far East. However, it's worth noting that about 6 years ago, Putin imposed sanctions on North Korea for its nuclear tests. He also suspended scientific and technical cooperation between the two countries. So according to the decree at the time, such cooperation was only allowed if it did not contribute to the development of North Korea's nuclear and ballistic programs. However, again, now the leader of the Kremlin is the main nuclear threat to the world. And North Korean dictator, sanctioned by Putin, is Putin's closest ally. How do sanctions affect a country's economy? So, are the sanctions of the civilized world against the Russian dictatorship effective? As the war has shown, sanctions are an important tool, but on their own, they just cannot stop the aggression of a state like Russia. Sanctions must be continuously strengthened in response to the escalating criminal activities of the terrorist state. But as a restraining factor, they don't work effectively enough. Another problem with sanctions, as many experts note, is that they are not a timely taken measure and are always imposed later than needed. This is because each time sanctions run into private interest of those responsible for imposing these very sanctions. For example, sanctions against Russian nuclear energy. Russia has been engaged in nuclear terrorism for over a year, having captured the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and throughout this time there have been periodic discussions in the media about the threat posed by the seizure to the security for all of Europe. The nuclear threat posed by Putin's dictatorship is regularly discussed in the media, yet there are still no sanctions against Rosatom. Why? Sanctions should be designed not just to increase the damage, but to make the very existence of the aggressor problematic. And this concerns not only the interest of Ukraine, but also potential aggressions worldwide. For now, I must say my goodbyes to you, dear ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being on my show. Talk for more. Hope to see you soon.